Welcome to Wisdom Planet. Wisdom worth spreading. Happy listening.
Let me tell you about a book that I think you'll find quite thought-provoking. It's titled The Anxious Generation by American psychologist Jonathan Haidt. Haidt starts the book with a fictional story that, while seemingly absurd, is actually quite chilling. He asks you to imagine that you have a 10-year-old child, a bright and lovable kid. One day, you're approached by representatives from a high-tech space exploration company. They inform you that your child has been selected to be part of their mission to colonize Mars. Your child will soon be taken on a spaceship with other kids and eventually deposited on the surface or in an underground human settlement on the Red Planet. You begin to worry. Will your child be able to survive and thrive in the harsh Martian environment? With its intense radiation, thin atmosphere, and unique gravity? Will they learn the complex technology needed to make the settlement self-sustaining? Will they be able to live together harmoniously and refrain from harming each other in a distant and isolated environment? With no adults present? Just as you're about to protest, the company representative hands you a form and coldly informs you that your child has already signed a contract and that, by company policy, parental consent is irrelevant. They're taking your child away to a secret and secluded training facility to prepare for the launch. Sound far-fetched? But Haidt then tells us that this story is not really fiction. It's happening right before our eyes. Just replace space exploration company and Mars settlement with consumer electronics manufacturers and internet-connected devices, and it all starts to make sense. Haidt's starting point for this book is a straightforward observation: the internet and consumer electronics, such as our smartphones, tablets, and gaming consoles, are becoming incredibly powerful forces in shaping the minds and development of our children and teenagers. What's more, we're letting this happen almost by default, with little regulation and even less parental awareness. We're essentially giving these tech companies free rein to mold our kids' cognition and emotions. The author, Haidt, is a prominent American social psychologist who was named one of the world's top thinkers in 2013 by Prospect magazine. He's also the author of The Happiness Hypothesis and The Righteous Mind. In this new book, published in 2024, Haidt turns his attention to a global phenomenon: what happens when children's lives are saturated with the internet and electronic devices. Haidt argues that it's creating an unprecedented mental and emotional health crisis among our young people. The negative effects are already starting to show up in the form of declining social skills, learning problems, cognitive stagnation, serious physical health issues, and mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. These conditions are particularly acute among Generation Z, those born after 2000. Hence, Haidt refers to these screen-addicted kids as the anxious generation, which also serves as the title of his new book. In the rest of my talk, I'll be drawing on Haidt's research to explore the origins, mechanisms, and specific harms of this global mental health crisis among our youth triggered by the internet and electronic devices. Finally, we'll see what Haidt, as a prominent social psychologist, has to say about what can be done to address this crisis. 英文翻译, simulated native-like expression. Let me tell you about a book that I think you'll find quite thought-provoking. It's titled The Anxious Generation by American psychologist Jonathan Haidt. Haidt starts the book with a fictional story that, while seemingly absurd, is actually quite chilling. He asks you to imagine that you have a 10-year-old child, a bright and lovable kid. One day, you're approached by representatives from a high-tech space exploration company. They inform you that your child has been selected to be part of their mission to colonize Mars. Your child will soon be taken on a spaceship with other kids and eventually deposited on the surface or in an underground human settlement on the Red Planet. You begin to worry. Will your child be able to survive and thrive in the harsh Martian environment? With its intense radiation, thin atmosphere, and unique gravity? Will they learn the complex technology needed to make the settlement self-sustaining? Will they be able to live together harmoniously and refrain from harming each other in a distant and isolated environment? With no adults present? Just as you're about to protest, the company representative hands you a form and coldly informs you that your child has already signed a contract and that, by company policy, parental consent is irrelevant. They're taking your child away to a secret and secluded training facility to prepare for the launch. Sound far-fetched? But Haidt then tells us that this story is not really fiction. It's happening right before our eyes. Just replace space exploration company and Mars settlement with consumer electronics manufacturers and internet-connected devices, and it all starts to make sense. Haidt's starting point for this book is a straightforward observation: the internet and consumer electronics, such as our smartphones, tablets, and gaming consoles, are becoming incredibly powerful forces in shaping the minds and development of our children and teenagers. What's more, we're letting this happen almost by default, with little regulation and even less parental awareness. We're essentially giving these tech companies free rein to mold our kids' cognition and emotions. The author, Haidt, is a prominent American social psychologist who was named one of the world's top thinkers in 2013 by Prospect magazine. He's also the author of The Happiness Hypothesis and The Righteous Mind. In this new book, published in 2024, Haidt turns his attention to a global phenomenon: what happens when children's lives are saturated with the internet and electronic devices. Haidt argues that it's creating an unprecedented mental and emotional health crisis among our young people. The negative effects are already starting to show up in the form of declining social skills, learning problems, cognitive stagnation, serious physical health issues, and mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. These conditions are particularly acute among Generation Z, those born after 2000. Hence, Haidt refers to these screen-addicted kids as the anxious generation, which also serves as the title of his new book. In the rest of my talk, I'll be drawing on Haidt's research to explore the origins, mechanisms, and specific harms of this global mental health crisis among our youth triggered by the internet and electronic devices. Finally, we'll see what Haidt, as a prominent social psychologist, has to say about what can be done to address this crisis. Haidt recalls how, when he talked to parents as part of his social psychology work, the conversation would inevitably turn to their children's iWorld, their immersion in smartphones, social media, and video games. The parents' lament was familiar. They described being locked in a pattern of ICT with their children over screen time, as devices and methods of circumventing parental controls multiplied, and family relationships fractured over digital distractions. One father told Haidt that his 11-year-old son James was mildly autistic. When the pandemic forced his school to go virtual, he bought James a Sony PlayStation to occupy him during what would have been school hours. Initially, screen time seemed to alleviate James's symptoms. He became obsessed with the popular shooter game Fortnite, and he found a supportive community of friends online. However, as James's gaming escalated, his parents grew concerned and tried to limit his screen time. His withdrawal was extreme. On top of his autistic depression and anxiety, he became angry and aggressive in ways his parents had never seen. Haidt has been involved in social psychology surveys. Had have found that, between 2010 and 2020, the proportion of American teenage boys experiencing major depression increased by 161%, and for teenage girls by 145%, and it has continued to worsen since 2020. Youth suicide and self-harm have also been rising sharply in the U.S. since 2010. What was causing such a rapid deterioration in the mental and emotional health of teenagers, at a time in their lives when they should be flourishing? Haidt began to suspect that the digital devices and the internet might be important drivers. For a start, the timeline of their increasing prevalence aligns almost perfectly with the onset of this decline in American teenage well-being. In 2011, according to the Pew Research Center, 77% of American teenagers owned a mobile phone, of which about 23% were smartphones. Just 5 years later, in 2016, 79% of American teenagers had a smartphone. Smartphone ownership was as high as 28% even among 8 to 12-year-olds. The year 2010 also saw the release of the iPhone 4, the first Apple smartphone with a front-facing camera. Haidt says we should not underestimate the significance of this technical feature, which sparked a revolution in social media. With the front-facing camera, taking and sharing selfies became frictionless. The combination of Apple's smartphone and image-focused social media platforms such as Instagram was electrifying. Within a year, Instagram's user base had exploded from 10 million to 90 million, the vast majority young people, who had discovered a way to use images of their lives to command attention and expand their social networks. Unlike the digital phones that had come before, which allowed only for voice calls and text messaging, the smartphone provided an endless closed loop of virtual experience. From games to social interactions to videos to shopping, there was a constant stream of information to consume. One clickable link after another, providing a perpetual dopamine hit. Increasingly, smartphone users developed a fear of missing out, a compulsive need to stay plugged into the information stream, lest they be disconnected from their peers, even momentarily. For teenagers, acutely sensitive to social status, such a fear of missing out could be particularly strong. In 2015, Haidt found, the average American teenager spent 7 hours a day on screens, and around 25% said they went online as often as possible. By 2022, that figure had nearly doubled to 46%. The combination of portable digital devices and the internet, Haidt argues, has had the effect of putting a portal in children's pockets, a gateway to a seductive, immersive yet deeply uncertain and potentially dangerous universe. Their friends live inside social media accounts or online games. The world they inhabit is made up of endlessly scrolling short videos on streaming platforms, each served up by algorithms designed to keep them engaged, and they spend more time interacting with keyboards and touch screens than with real-life friends and family members, and even pets. Other social and clinical psychologists, of course, have argued that this rise in youthful anxiety could be the result of economic downturns and other global stresses, such as war and climate extremes. But Haidt is not convinced. For one thing, the U.S. unemployment rate has been falling since 2010. Moreover, social anxieties that stem from external problems tend to draw people together, since taking collective action on a shared concern can give people a sense of purpose and belonging. The opposite of what we are seeing in the mental health of teenagers today. Another piece of evidence that links the rise in teenage mental distress to increased screen use is that it is a global phenomenon. As well as North America, similar trends have been seen among young people in Northern and Western Europe, Australasia, and East Asia. What do these regions have in common? They are relatively affluent and have high rates of internet and smartphone use. The influence of the internet and smart gadgets on the mental development of children and adolescents is detrimental. According to author Haidt, fully understanding this issue requires understanding the cognitive development of children and adolescents. Human development entails a unique pattern of fast to slow to fast development. In the first 2 years of life, human development is rapid, it then slows down during childhood, ages 3 to 12. Once adolescence hits, development rapidly accelerates again. Why do humans have a prolonged and slow childhood, unlike other species? According to Haidt, it's a consequence of the evolution of collaboration and specialized social communities for raising offspring. With language and writing as the vessels for transmitting knowledge and experience, humans can afford an extended childhood with ample time for learning and environmental adaptation. Haidt asserts that play and peer engagement are central to human childhood. From what may seem like frivolous activities to adults, a child's cognition and thought patterns are shaped. In neuroscience terms, human cognition and thought involve neurons connecting and exchanging electronic signals. If 2 or more neurons connect successfully, it signifies a new memory or skill. During play, a child's brain is abuzz with neurons extending tendrils and connecting with unfamiliar patterns, sparking electrical impulses and sending signals. Neuroscientific research indicates that neurons grow new tendrils frequently in response to electrical signals and that more neurons are involved and active in more complex cognitive and environmental situations. Hence, group play in a natural setting is superb for learning and developing cognitive ability. Immersive interactions with nature and peers offer rich experiences. Play promotes physical coordination, while communication, teamwork, empathy, and caring for others are fostered through role-playing and collaboration. Technology and the internet, however, have altered this dynamic. Haidt cites longitudinal data illustrating a precipitous decline in daily face-to-face interactions between children and peers from 60% plus in 1991 to around 20% in 2017. In Haidt's words, children and adolescents have traded a childhood of physical play for one immersed in digital experiences. This may prompt the argument that digital environments offer diverse interactions and experiences, enabling connections beyond time and space. Haidt counters this argument with his social psychology research. First, physical exploration and play provide greater freedom and foster creativity and curiosity. Children imagine wooden structures as vessels for distant voyages and create figurines, animals, and buildings from clay, sand, or blocks. In contrast, video games restrict players to programmed rules and confines them to a screen. Worse, video games offer quick and easy achievements, triggering the brain's reward circuitry, stimulating dopamine release, and prompting addictive behavior. Neuroscience experiments have shown that video games activate fewer brain regions compared to real-world play experiences. Moreover, studies of heavy long-term gamers have revealed thinning or localized loss of gray matter in regions responsible for complex functions such as frontal lobes, empathy, language, muscle control, and task organization. These essential human functions are compromised by such deterioration. Second, physical interaction and play foster coordination, not just physical coordination but also an ability to cooperate and communicate. Activities like group jump rope or synchronized dance originate from ancient human traditions, fostering a sense of community. Psychologists conducted an experiment where students were divided into two groups and asked to sway to music played through earphones. Group 1 heard the same melody, while Group 2's music varied. Group 1 danced more uniformly. When assigned a collaborative task, Group 1 completed it more quickly and efficiently. This underscores the need for deliberate development of cooperation, essential for societal functioning. Virtual communication over the internet does not offer this advantage. As Haidt states, physical interactions constitute synchronous communication. You send signals through words, facial expressions, and gestures, and the recipient responds promptly. This has profound implications. For example, infant interactions with parents, eye contact, touch, and facial imitation establish the foundation for social and emotional patterns. The more parents respond, the more secure a child feels and the more positive their emotional patterns. Similarly, children learn to decipher facial and bodily cues from peers in physical settings, become attuned to others' emotions and intentions, and understand boundaries and expectations. However, online communication is asynchronous, it lacks immediate feedback, and the absence of physical presence, facial expressions, and tone of voice limits its information content. Furthermore, early exposure to technology and the internet irreversibly impacts children with this asynchronous, low-information communication. Why? Social psychologists like Haidt suggest that ages 9-15 are crucial for prefrontal cortex development, the region responsible for self-awareness, attention, and emotional control. Many critical behaviors and cognitive patterns, such as communication style, emotional response, and self-worth, form and stabilize during this period. If children spend more time in the virtual realm, their communication and empathy development will be hindered. As an example, Haidt points out the heavy reliance on emojis and memes in young people's online conversations, indicating their inability to articulate emotions effectively in virtual settings. The final detrimental consequence of technology and the internet is value distortion. One critical societal function is transmitting knowledge, skills, and values through role models. Apart from parents, children are drawn to exceptional adults within their communities. Evolutionary anthropologist Heinrich refers to this as prestige bias. In pre-industrial societies, children emulated warriors, hunters, and artisans. The advent of mass media and consumer culture shifted this focus to celebrities and entrepreneurs. However, the internet has introduced influencers. Unfortunately, many influencers gain attention not for substantial contributions or exceptional skills but through chance occurrences. In Haidt's words, in the age of the influencer, prestige can be decoupled from excellence. Influencers represent a bandwagon effect amplified by social media algorithms. Haidt specifically mentions the Kardashians as examples of this phenomenon, lacking the talents of entertainers or actors yet amassing significant followings by sharing mundane aspects of their personal lives. Of course, these issues often take a long time to reveal themselves. But in addition to these long-term, societal problems, Twenge argues that excessive screen use can have immediate, detrimental consequences for kids. Twenge unpacks the research in detail in the chapters that follow. But let's take a look at the ways that all kids, boys and girls, experience harm from screen use. 1. Social deprivation. As we discussed earlier, the amount of time kids spend on screens crowds out in-person social interaction. While screen use is associated with declines in social interaction for people of all ages, it's particularly pronounced for teenagers. According to Twenge, from 2003 to 2019, the amount of time 15 to 24-year-old Americans spend socializing in person each day plummeted from about 160 minutes to 40, a decrease of more than 75%. This decline in real-world socializing creates a vicious cycle. Teens who spend their formative years immersed in screens struggle to develop their social and empathy skills, and these underdeveloped skills make them increasingly anxious and frustrated in social situations. That's why today's teens, despite having hundreds or even thousands of friends on social media and other communication apps, report feeling lonelier than adults. 2. Sleep deprivation. Screen use cuts into sleep time for people of all ages, but the impact is especially pronounced for teens. A 2012 study of sleep habits involving 4,700 adolescents in 7 countries found that 24% of those under the age of 24 said their habit of using their phones before bed made it harder to fall asleep and reduced the amount of sleep they got. And while insufficient sleep leaves teens feeling tired and grumpy the next day, it can also contribute to a variety of long-term mental health and cognitive problems, such as depression and ADHD. 3. Attention problems. This one is probably pretty familiar to you, since we've covered it extensively on the channel. Put simply, people who use screens tend to engage in a kind of continuous partial attention mode, watching a show while scrolling through social media while texting, that sort of thing. For teenagers, whose brains are still developing, it's already hard to stay focused. And this kind of rapid-fire information consumption, jumping from one stimulating thing to the next, makes it even harder to develop sustained attention. And good attention control is foundational for learning and other complex cognitive skills. 4. Addiction. And of course, there's the problem of addiction. For some people, screen use becomes so compulsive that they feel intense withdrawal symptoms when they try to cut back, including anxiety, irritability, and emptiness. So by now, I'm sure most parents are feeling pretty alarmed. But it gets worse. According to Twenge, in addition to these problems that affect boys and girls equally, screen use also has some unique risks for each gender. Let's start with boys. We talked a lot about the problems associated with excessive screen use and gaming for boys in our previous video on Matt Haig's The Comfort Crisis, and Twenge's findings are largely consistent with his, so I'll just summarize them briefly here. Lower psychological resilience. A lack of adventurousness and exploration. This is because video games and online worlds allow boys to succeed without putting in real effort or facing real consequences, leading them to become increasingly unwilling to work hard to improve themselves in the real world. Exposure to violent and sexual content in games and online CES can lead some teenage boys to imitate that behavior in real life, resulting in violent attacks on others and other antisocial behavior. Health problems, such as obesity, cardiovascular issues, and hearing and vision impairment. So that's boys. Now let's turn our attention to the unique risks of excessive screen use for teenage girls. And here's where Twenge offers some of the most startling new insights. Girls are often harmed even more by screen use. It's true that when we think of internet addiction or screen addiction, we tend to think first of boys. We don't often consider teenage girls. But Twenge draws on her own research and shares a case study to illustrate what can happen. Alexis, an 11-year-old, secretly created an Instagram account without her parents' permission. In order to pass the age requirement, she lied and said she was 13, the minimum age to use Instagram. Alexis told Twenge that she got hooked on Instagram because she wanted to fit in with her peers and not miss out on anything. Because if she missed out, she would be excluded from social circles, and that would make her feel worthless and invite ridicule from her female classmates. At first, Alexis loved it. She could keep up with everything her classmates were doing, and she gained followers, which made her feel like a mini celebrity. But soon, things took a turn for the worse. Because the platform used big data algorithms to analyze Alexis's usage patterns, it began to feed her a steady stream of content related to her interests, including fitness, dieting, and weight loss. This led Alexis to develop severe body image anxiety. She soon became depressed and anorexic, and had to be hospitalized. She drew a cartoon of herself as a little girl, huddled in the corner, her phone on the floor and her laptop on the bed. The cartoon was covered in self-deprecating labels like fat, ugly, loser, kill yourself, and so on. Why does this happen? According to Twenge, it comes down to some key differences in the way girls think and experience the world that make them especially vulnerable to the addictive qualities of social media. For example, Twenge cites a 2014 study that found that nearly one-third of girls said they spent more than 20 hours per week on social media. In comparison, only about half as many teenage boys were heavy social media users. This difference is due to the fact that girls tend to be more empathetic and more invested in maintaining relationships and social connections than boys. And during adolescence, girls are also more likely to look to their peers for validation and feedback on their self-worth. This unique psychological profile, Twenge argues, makes girls particularly vulnerable in the age of social media. And research from the UK shows that girls' risk of developing depression increases as their time spent on social media goes up. For heavy social media users, girls who spend 5 hours per day on social media, the prevalence of depression climbs to a shocking 40%. According to Twenge, girls' vulnerability in this image culture comes down to a few factors. Twenge argues that girls' more sensitive emotional perception and adolescent insecurities about their appearance make them more susceptible to body image anxiety. Couple that with the hot or not judgment that's so prevalent on social media, and it's a recipe for self-objectification, as girls compare themselves to those they perceive as more physically attractive. When faced with conflict, girls are more likely to use social relationships as a weapon. You can see this in the way that teen boys resolve conflicts, often with physical aggression. But for girls, when they have conflicts, they may ostracize someone from a social group and spread rumors to damage their reputation and status as a friend. Twenge notes that she has observed how girls who are perceived as exceptionally beautiful or talented on social media are often the targets of vicious rumors alleging cosmetic surgery, abortion, or that their photos are heavily doctored, and these rumors are often spread by other girls. Negative emotions can spread through social networks, and empathetic girls are more susceptible to contagion. Now that we've covered the main content of The Anxious Generation, let's explore how we can address the issue of excessive screen time among children and teenagers. Author Haidt suggests that we need a systemic approach, involving governments, tech companies, schools, and parents. So, what can governments and companies do to help? Firstly, governments should pass legislation to make protecting children's best interests a top priority for companies designing products and services. For instance, all online content published for minors under 18 should have the highest level of privacy protection, and children should not be able to modify their privacy settings without parental consent. Additionally, the age limit for online access should be raised from 13 to 16, ensuring that children are protected from harmful online influences during their critical cognitive and emotional development phase. Secondly, governments should implement an effective age verification system for online users. One possible solution is to require users to provide their driver's license number as verification when registering for online games or social media accounts. Alternatively, biotech companies could develop a detection technology that assigns a unique blockchain password to each individual upon reaching 16, which can be used for online registration and other purposes. Moreover, governments and parents should collaborate to encourage children to engage in more offline activities and provide them with dedicated spaces and facilities. For example, schools and public parks could set up adventure playgrounds with facilities like merry-go-rounds, climbing frames, and obstacle courses. In terms of schools, Haidt suggests implementing a no-phone zone policy, where students are required to put their phones away during class hours. According to a 2024 report by the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, Schools that implemented smartphone management policies saw a significant decrease in psychological distress and bullying among students, as well as an improvement in academic performance. Schools can also do more to help, such as setting up sports clubs, interest groups, and volunteer programs that teach children essential life skills like cooking, laundry, and machine repair. These activities can help children develop a sense of accomplishment and independence, reducing their reliance on virtual satisfaction. Lastly, parents play a crucial role in preventing children from excessive screen time. Haidt emphasizes that parents should take control of electronic devices at home, avoid using them as a substitute for parenting, and set a good example by limiting their own screen time. Parents should also implement strict rules for screen time, such as limiting viewing time to 1 hour a day for children between 2 to 5 years old and 2 hours a day for those between 6 to 12 years old. By working together, we can create a safer and healthier online environment for children and teenagers.
Congratulations on finishing another book. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe to our Wisdom Planet audiobook channel. Like and share it with family and friends. Wisdom worth spreading and opening up a better future. Thank you and see you again.